Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness podcast. I'm here with co-host Walter Dial, who is tax partner at GRF CPAs and Advisors here in Bethesda, Maryland. Our mission here on the podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building a sellable or transferable business, and then planning for your eventual exit from the business. We want to help you build a business that is sellable and then exit successfully on your own terms and conditions. Walter, it's not unusual for us to hear from clients or prospective clients that they want to test the waters in selling their business. In other words, a business broker may have contacted them and said, hey, you want to sell your business? And they've decided, you know what, let's take it to market as it is and just see what happens. This is one of the areas where, in my opinion, the phrase often used by business owners, I don't know what I don't know, can actually result in a very bad idea. In his book, The Art of Selling Your Business, John Warrillow, who we've had on the podcast before and who we endorse, says you don't want to put your business on the market unless you're fully committed to seeing it through, seeing the process through. And by the way, that's a book, The Art of Selling Your Business by John Warrillow, that we'd highly recommend. And so that's what we want to discuss today, testing the waters, a bad idea. Walter, let's first talk about why we think it's a bad idea, and then maybe provide some thoughts about pre-sale preparation so that a buyer could be fully committed to seeing through the decision and the process, which is not an insignificant process, to go to market. So what's one of the first things, Walter, that comes to your mind as to why it can be a bad idea just to test the waters and put your business on the market and just see what happens?
Yeah. I think the first thing that comes to mind, Pat, is, when you and I are working with business owners who are just starting to think about, their exit strategy and they're starting to formulate plans. One of the main concerns we have is keeping things confidential. And I think a lot of our listeners out there may not be fully aware of the negative implications of kind of letting it leak that maybe your business is for sale. I mean, you've got a number of issues if that happens. You've got employees who are going to be thinking, oh boy, this is a good time for me to get out. You've got competitors who can be, telling your customers, hey, I understand this guy's getting out of the business. Just a lot of problems with that. So if you're not at that point, if you're not fully committed to going through with a sale, I may be exaggerating to a certain extent, but you could potentially destroy your business in the meantime. So that to me is certainly a big concern. The other concern is, again, our experience working with business owners, really putting your business up for sale is a huge time commitment. I mean, you've got to be focused on that. And that's why we always say, it really only works for a business owner who has a company where he's built transferable value, meaning he's got a team in place that can run the business, because he's going to be almost fully devoted, if not fully devoted, to the sale process.
Yeah, and then because of that,
yeah,
you can end up taking your eye off the ball and running the business, which can result in the value of your business decreasing in the process of trying to sell it, because it's such a huge, massive process. Back to the confidentiality issue for a second. Yeah, so the confidentiality, that is a big thing. Everybody is committed to confidentiality in regard to a sale. NDAs are signed and everyone's committed to it. But at some point you're and you mentioned all these different constituents, stakeholders, if you will. At some point, the stakeholders are going to find out one way or another. And to your point, it can be, if not destructive, certainly it can be disruptive and can impact your business, and maybe to a point where it's irrevocable or irreparable. So that confidentiality thing is not a small thing. And it's hard for it not to leak one way or another eventually. Because for one thing, the you're going to have to tell you're going to have to tell a couple of key employees who are going to be involved with the extensive due diligence process.
Right.
Then you started to talk about deal fatigue, if you will, where one or more parties starts to get just worn out by the process and are tempted to bail out, and often do. And yeah, let's talk about that. What they become fatigued, where the fatigue starts to set in, and it's called due diligence. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And Pat, one thing, you and I don't work with any business brokers or sales intermediaries who would, cold call someone and say, hey, not sure if you've been thinking about selling your business, but why don't we put it on the market just to see what happens?
Right.
And I wouldn't suggest any of our listeners work with someone like that.
No. You don't want to work with a transaction intermediary like that, because the deal can easily blow up if yeah. So then due diligence, let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we've been seeing a number of deals. I mean, deals that you and I have been working on with our exit planning clients, and I've got a couple tax clients at the CPA firm who are involved in selling their business right now. So I've been involved in the due diligence process in a number of these deals, and there's been kind of a consistency in where the focus has been. So I thought it might just be helpful to kind of mention that real quickly.
What are some of the hot issues that we're hearing about in regards?
So, and we did a webinar, we did a podcast a while back about, about sell side due diligence and everything. So so I'm not going to go into great detail, but one area, as I've mentioned in that podcast, that keeps popping up is state tax compliance. Every state is hungry for money. They're getting more sophisticated in trying to figure out if you're conducting business in their state. They're putting in rules that make it more likely that even though you may think you're not really doing business in their state, they're going to have rules that establish nexus for you. And what I find interesting is most of the sales I've been working with are asset sales. So you kind of feel like saying to the other side, why do you even care? You're buying their assets. None of this is going to accrue to you. But, the cynic in me is like, well, part of the due diligence process on the buyer side is just to come up with any problems they can identify to hope to maybe knock down the price a little bit. But on the other hand, they are, they've got a due diligence list, and it seems like they use the same one, whether it's an asset or a stock sale. But at any rate, so state taxes are certainly a big one. I know for our business clients, we're filing returns in more and more states, and clients aren't happy about it because, it's a pain. It doesn't generally result in more tax. It usually just changes what state you're paying your tax to, but still it's a headache. So, I fully understand that. For our couple of the bigger ones I'm working on, they actually have some operations in foreign countries. And you have to be careful there, because even like the one I'm working on right now, they're just the foreign entities are just branches. So from a US tax return, it all just gets consolidated and reported in full. But even in those situations, there's certain IRS elections that need to be filed and things like that. So, in due diligence, they're going to be checking to make sure that you filed all the appropriate forms with the IRS. The other thing we've talked about is just the whole structure of the sale, asset versus stock. Almost everything we're seeing nowadays is an asset sale. And the other thing would be
hearing more about cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Is being an issue.
Yeah, you're right. And then just the whole entity structure, if you're an LLC, it just gives you all the flexibility in the world when it comes to the sale. And it has the best, even on an asset sale, it has the best benefits for the buyer, and it's great for the seller. A lot of S corps nowadays, what we're seeing is there's what's called an F reorganization, which can basically turn your S corp into an LLC. And especially if it's a venture capital purchase, they're going to want you to do that. It's pretty simple, and your lawyer, your tax attorney, or the deal attorney will actually take care of it. But it's just something to be aware of. Haven't had to deal, fortunately, with any C corp sales, because they tend to be the worst, and that's where you really got to fight for the stock sale. So fortunately, there aren't that many of those nowadays, for us anyway, our size of business. So that's kind of what I'm seeing out there most recently.
Yeah. So listeners, that's a short list of hot issues in regard to due diligence, but the due diligence process for a legitimate business and a legitimate buyer is extensive, and it's pages of required information and documentation. And it's that process, along with some other aspects, that can end up in this deal fatigue, if you will, where one or more parties just gets worn out to the point where they bail. And then so that was like the second issue we mentioned here in regard to testing the waters. And then the third was taking your eye off the ball and running the business. And the business can start to decline, actually, in financial performance, as well as overall performance and valuation during a process where you're trying to make a deal. So that's one of the other potential consequences to just testing the waters. Okay, so Walter, let's now provide some thoughts about what to do in order to move forward with a full commitment. Like Warrillow says in his book, don't move forward with putting your business on the market unless you have a full commitment to see it through.
Yeah.
Well, one, I'll just start us here. Foundational, of course, to everything is, what are your goals, business owner listener, in regard to timing? Do you have pushes and pulls? Do you have anything pushing you out of the business, like health reasons or financial hardship or whatever? Or do you have anything that's pulling you, like you want to travel the world, you want to spend more time with your family? What are your goals in regard to financial, values-based goals? Do you care about your employees to the point where you want to try to sell the business to them, those who have helped you build it? Clarity on that, clarity on any legacy goals, because it's foundational. And we hear from deal makers that oftentimes owners aren't deciding these things or getting clarity on these things until they're actually at the deal table. And so that results in deals not getting done, because if the owner is there at the deal table trying to decide, okay, boy, you know what, I don't want that because I really care about my employees to the point where I don't want that to happen. All of that needs to be thought through well in advance, so that when you're at the deal table, you can be fully committed to moving forward because you're clear on what your goals are. Any thoughts about that piece there, Walter, in regard to goals and objectives?
I think you're exactly right. I mean, that's foundational. And I think, some of the data that's going to roll into that, formulating your goals, one of the big pieces is the value of your business and how ready your business really is for exit. So, the worst idea is someone who says, I'm not sure how much my business is worth. I'll float it on the market just to see what kind of offers I get. That's not the way to figure out how much your business is worth. You're much better off just getting an estimate of value. And where we find what's really useful with that is if you couple the estimate of value with the readiness report that you guys prepare, Pat, it really helps focus a business owner on what they need to do to drive the value of their business and get them where they need to be as far as meeting their goals. So to me, that's really the second step.
Right. And you bring up a good point. It's a lot less costly and risky if you just pay a few $1,000 for an estimate of value or opinion of value
Yeah.
on your business, rather than testing the waters to see what it's worth, because the testing the waters piece can just, it actually destroy,
Yeah.
at least disrupt the business. And that gets back to the goals and objectives too. Oftentimes when we see owners who have just decided to test the waters, they're not clear on really what they want. They're not clear on all those goals. They just want to see if their business is sellable in the marketplace and what they could get. And again, it's just not a real wise move. Another thing that comes to mind, Walter, is taxes. And that's your fastball. What would you say about pre-sale tax planning?
Yeah, I mean, that's another critical piece. I mean, it may turn out that maybe you're a C Corp. And that's, like I've mentioned, I'm not going to go into the details, but that's not generally the best structure when you go to sell your business. So if you decide you want to switch it to an S Corp, there's still some tax problems for a 5-year period following that conversion date. So, that's just another argument for planning ahead and really looking at every aspect of the sale, which includes certainly the tax ramifications.
Yeah, and then the other thing, we'll mention it again, is pre-sale due diligence. If you can have systematically for years in advance, just to stay on top of the things that getting ready years in advance, everything that a buyer or an acquirer is going to ask for, and staying on top of it, the chances of you getting deal fatigue in the midst of a deal process are much lessened, because the deal fatigue often comes from the process of due diligence and the back and forth and all like that. And then if an acquirer feels like they're constantly waiting on information, that is never a good thing. So pre-sale due diligence, we would say, get started on that years in advance, if possible, to just systematically get it done over time.
Yeah.
Prepare Pat, everything in advance that a buyer is going to ask for.
Yeah. Let me go back to something you said, which I think is really, really important, which was the whole pushes and pulls. Because I think, we both have had calls. I mean, I literally had a call from a client, or not a client, but a potential client, who called and said, I'd like to sell my business. And I'm like, well, what's your time frame? He said, well, he was half joking, but his answer was, I'd love to sell it tomorrow. And I think if your main motivation is pushes, you're the type of person who's going to be really tempted to test the water, because you're thinking, you know what, I can't stand this anymore. Let's just go ahead and see what happens. I mean, what do you say to that person? In those cases, is your goal? I mean, number one, you got to figure out what's pushing them out. Well, go ahead. You tell me.
Yeah, well, you got to draw them out further. Ask them all the right questions, hopefully, and draw them out further about their motivations and why they feel this sense of urgency around getting out, and more, and just learn more about the pushes.
Yeah.
Because they may be making some assumptions about their exit as it pertains to the pushes that need to be tested and maybe even challenged.
Yeah.
And so they may not need to have as much urgency about it as they think, because whenever you make a big urgent decision like that, and particularly one as significant with so much at stake, it's never a good idea, is it? It seldom works out, really.
Yeah.
You got to slow down. So a lot of times, we do help them just to slow. Okay, let's slow down and just take a look at the data, including what you think's pushing you. Oh, the other thing I would say about the pushes, the people who leave more because of pulls being something that they've got passion for and vision for, and it has a sense of purpose and meaning and significance to it. Those folks are more of a chance of them being happy in their exit than the people who just leave because of the pushes. Now the pushes
Yeah.
sometimes are unavoidable. Could be
Yeah.
health, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But boy, it's great. It's better for you if your business is ready uh, to be transferred or sold if you're being pushed out than if it's not ready. And it takes years to do.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because a lot of times, the pushes are oftentimes, I think you'll agree with this, but let me know if you do. Oftentimes the owner is just overwhelmed because he's doing everything. The other aspect I see is that they're working with the wrong type of client, which is stressing them out and putting a lot of just a lot of work they shouldn't have to be doing. So both of those problems, if the business owner has some financial resources and the time, both of those pushes can be resolved. Like the client I talked to who wanted to leave tomorrow, he was too small to really change things. But most of the clients we deal with, they do have the ability to build a management team and to get rid of some clients and replace them with the type of clients they should be working with.
No, great point. One of the pushes can be, I'm just burnt out. I can't take another day of it. I'm working 50, 60 hours a week. Well, the irony of that is if you have built a business that is transferable or sellable, those pushes like that, the burnout, to your point, are minimized and maybe don't even exist. It's kind of like this client we're working with right now. She's doing a phenomenal job of building a business that's going to be sellable or transferable. And to the point where, the business certainly isn't central to her at this point. And she may just get to a point where her exit um, strategy is, you know what, I'm going to keep this until the day I die. And just the cash flow from it is fantastic. And the risk has been mitigated and minimized because of all the systems, processes, and people I put in place. And life's good. And I don't really have any pushes. My health's good. I'm not burnt out, far from it. I get to do all kinds of fun things. And so I just may keep it.
Yeah. I
That's a
think
great
that's
point.
what's one of the things that's really cool about what we do is, like you always, I think we both always say good exit planning is good business planning. So if you truly have a business that has, top of the line transferability, just by its nature, it's an enjoyable business to run. So it's, I think that's really interesting in that when you have a really valuable business, you can, then it's the pools that are going to get you to sell because you've built something of real value. You're going to have the financial resources to go on to your next stage of life and maybe do something you're more passionate about or whatever.
Well, yeah, no, that's absolutely right. As a matter of fact, we'll go ahead and recommend another book written by Warrillow, John Warrillow, Built to Sell. A lot of what we've been talking about here in the last few minutes is he preaches that message in his first book, Built to Sell, and then of course it's highlighted again in The Art of Selling Your Business. So
Yeah.
Those are two good, easy reads, short reads, and we would encourage all small business owners to read both those books, really.
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts? Or are you going to close us out here? Well, let's summarize. Okay. So bad idea, at least from your exit readiness gang here. We think it's a bad idea to test the waters. It seldom works out well, and oftentimes it ends up in consequences that are at least disruptive, if not destructive. And we would say start years in advance to clarify your goals, financial, values-based, and legacy goals. Start well in advance doing pre-sale due diligence, getting everything ready for a potential buyer. Build a business that's transferable, of course. Do pre-sale tax planning. Take the lower risk approach and get an outside estimate of value rather than for a few $1,000s rather than going to market. Walter can do valuations. Contact Walter. So those are the things that we would suggest to you. Any final thoughts, Walter, before you close us out?
No, I think that was a great summary. That was a great summary.
Okay, good.
So I'll go ahead and close this. Listeners, as always, thanks for joining us for the podcast. If you want help in maximizing the value of your business or planning for your eventual exit, you can reach Pat at 301-859-0860. You can reach me at 301-951-9090. You can always access resources at exitreadiness.com, grfcpa.com, and nslp.com. If you use the code podcast when setting up an exitreadiness.com account, you'll receive a 10% discount on products. So until next time on the Exit Readiness podcast, this is Walter Dial and Pat Ennis signing off.